Because I think a lot of times when we start to compare ourselves to the people around us, we have to recognize, are these people around us lifting us up? Or are they actually creating more competition? Are they actually leading us back down a path we don't want to go? What are your actions saying you value? And if your actions aren't in line with what you want to value, how are you going to shift that to step into that person? When we seek perfection, this is what keeps us stuck in the cycle because it's comfortable, it's familiar, even though it's painful. So the hardest thing that you probably need to do is, because probably the habit you are avoiding the hardest is the one you need the most.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Kelsey, and I'm so excited to bring you our guest this week, who has actually been on our podcast before, but many, many years ago, if you guys remember. Cori Lefkowith is back on our podcast this week, and we have some new topics to cover. So Cori, welcome.
Thank you for having me back. It was such a pleasure last time. I'm so excited for today.
Yeah, I was, as we were discussing coming back on, I was like, she came on in the early days. I was trying to remember. I was like, was that 2 years ago? Because we've been on the podcast for like 7 years. And I always chalk it up to like 3 years for some reason. Like I stopped at 3. I was like,
I
and
always
then
have
at
to
one
do
point
that
I was like,
math.
fine.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say,
because sometimes when you put out like, so many episodes and you've been just doing it for a long time, it just kind of like stops at a certain point and then you're like, oh, just 5 years, and then you stop counting.
but it's been a while and I'm super excited to be back. And I think it's amazing how you can stay in contact with other amazing people in the industry, other strong women, and then we can lift each other up. So always happy to chat about it.
I love it. And honestly, I wanted to just start off. So, guys, if you don't know Cori and you haven't checked her out, we're going to talk a lot about the book she just released and just some of her messaging. But honestly, Cori, like we we have an interesting messaging going into a health and fitness space where there's so much diet culture and there's so much just kind of like quick fixes, and those sell. They're sexy. They go into the fads, and then whoever is doing it makes a lot of money in that moment. And then it just like doesn't have sustainable changes for the people, for the consumers who are still stuck in that rat race. And you have stayed on more of a whole person, holistic messaging that has evolved with you in your life. And I just want to thank you for that work that you're doing, because that's not an easy road. Like, anti-diet culture is not an easy road.
Well, it's interesting because I think for me, I never came at it just as a diet. It was always that empowerment for me. Like I was training in the gym to be better at tennis, to go to college and play. I was training to challenge myself and see how strong I could get. And then part of, my goals were aesthetic at some point. I wanted to see how I could push my body to get leaner and to get stronger. But in trying to get leaner, I realized how much there was that dieting culture, the quick fix, the things that set you up for failure later in life. And I saw my strength suffer, which is where I went down the rabbit hole of how can I look and feel my best? Because I do think, we like to look a certain way and there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't have to be at the expense of our longevity, our health. And finding that true balance is what sets us up for lasting success.
Yeah, it's that true balance for lasting success that like I really hold on to and try to talk about with all of our listeners, because when we think about some of those like short-term successes, they are they really successes? Because we find ourselves in the same position the following year, the following January, or the next time we're on to a special event or something that we have to like put whatever like diet or thing that may have worked at one time, when it's like we the success is actually being able to sustain things that work in your lifestyle. So some of your core messaging in your book, which we're definitely going to talk about, and I have here for anyone watching on YouTube. But it's called The Strong System: Transform Your Mindset and Body, and build your best body at any age, which I love, because any age is a really important topic that we're going to cover in this podcast. But some of your core messaging in the book is that every person's path is unique. Why do you think comparison is still one of the biggest reasons why people quietly write themselves off, especially in health and fitness?
Because comparison is something we are naturally inclined to do, and too often we are just told to fight it, to not compare. And I think that that's the wrong messaging because you're going to compare. It's part of our survival instinct. And so instead, if you recognize where comparison can be a negative, but also a positive, you can ultimately move forward. And you can see those things as opportunities, right? Someone's achieved a goal you want to achieve, you know you can get there. It's only negative when you start to say, I have to do it in this one way or it's not right. And I think that's where we start to see these ideals popping up. Like we see so many different messages of what the perfect diet is that we make ourselves feel guilty. And going back to what you said about, these short-term fixes actually being what sets us up for failure, I couldn't agree more. Those short-term fixes ultimately create not only habits that are unsustainable and us constantly feeling like the effort isn't worth the outcome, but they create lasting mindset changes that hold us back from using tools or tactics that would actually benefit us. So, that being said, and circling back to your question about comparison, I think it's normal and natural to do. And instead of fighting against it, we have to recognize when it's beneficial and when it's not, and then even who we're comparing ourselves to. Because I think a lot of times when we start to compare ourselves to the people around us, we have to recognize, are these people around us lifting us up, promoting us looking internally to pursue our best selves? Or are they actually creating more competition? Are they actually leading us back down a path we don't want to go?
What a great that's such a great take on comparison because there's a lot of discussion around comparison and just kind of like thinking about comparison is like that's such an ugly thing, push that aside, bury it, never talk about it again. Where in my opinion, there's so everything that it can be a detriment can also be something that works with us if we know how to use it. And if we look at it as pieces of those opportunities. And where you kind of like wrapped it around to that mindset shift of like these systems that haven't worked for you are having lasting effects on your mindset and how you're approaching the next one that's actually more damaging than whatever you did to your body during that like diet phase or during that like, extreme workout phase or like whatever it is that you did to your body during that time. Like your body's pretty resilient, it's going to recover, and so is your mind. But the actual impacts that happen during that are, when we fast forward, they carry on. And that mindset is like why I think not only I think you guys should check out the book, but, that when we talk about health and fitness, we are doing a disservice to everyone in the health and fitness industry if we're not talking about the mindset and if we're not talking about the implications of what you have done in your health and fitness journey and how that is going to impact you in the future.
The mindsets really are at the heart of everything. And we think about, motivation. I have to be motivated to take action. Well, you actually have to take action too to create motivation. And so we need to come back to mindset at every point that we can. As you brought up at the beginning too, going back to this, like we go on or off a plan. But ultimately, we are the plan. And only by adapting what we need over seasons as our needs, our goals, our body shifts, can we truly meet ourselves where we are to move forward. And so the more we have mindsets around specific tools or tactics, or even cling to an identity sort of locked in by those tools or tactics, like I'm a person who does keto, I'm a person who does CrossFit. Well, you might get injured. That low carb lifestyle might not work if you shift goals, right? And the more we lock in our identity to a dieting definition or a workout plan, the more we limit ourselves from seeing the other opportunities. And so it does come back to really assessing your mindset and why you believe what you believe and how those different tools or tactics are serving you. Because the more we can recognize that our mindset is everything, the more we get like the power and control and agency to constantly make changes to meet ourselves where we are to move forward.
I'm glad you brought up the story that we tell ourselves of who we are, because I think that's like such an important. I recently ran into this. I do CrossFit. I've done CrossFit for many, many years. But I've had a wrist injury. I've had a baby, and I was like, I want to run a 5K. And then the story that came in was like, "You're not a runner." And I was like, "Well, I'm a person who has the ability to run, so am I a runner?" Like, I was like, "I don't it's not like I'm just going to start, like, training for a marathon. That's not what I wanna do. It's not part of my goal subset, but, like, I can run, and that could be a fun thing to do on a Saturday." I know everyone's definition of fun, and not everyone is like, "Yes, Kelsey, a 5K would be a great time." But I was like, I could run it with my son in the stroller, and but the initial, like, story that even I was telling myself was like, "You're not a runner, there's gonna be runners there." And I was like, "What does it matter?" Like, at the end of the day, like, what does it matter? I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna run, and it's gonna be a great time if that's what you wanna do. So I know that that was just a great segue into, like, talking about how people define themselves, and that's by age, by stress, health issues, life circumstances. And for all of our listeners right now, I I do want to implore you to kind of think about how you define yourselves as I ask Corey this question, because I want you to think about like where you fall in how you define yourself. Like, what are some of the things that come out right away when you introduce yourself or when you're talking about yourself? I'm Kelsey and I am blank, whatever it is, how you define yourself. So, how can you help someone stop identifying with their limitations and start seeing what's possible?
I think it goes back to assessing the language that you use and this as you were even mentioning the story that you tell yourself, "I'm not a runner," right? That language is so powerful and tied into our strengths are our weaknesses, and our weaknesses are the other side of the coin to our strengths. And I like to think of it as what words do I use to describe myself positively? And where can those ultimately hold me back? And what negative words do I use that are also tied to strengths? Because so often we just see the negative, oh, I'm not good at X, right? Or I'm a little too OCD. Well, maybe you're OCD, but that also comes with it being type A and being really organized in another way, right? Maybe you're really good at pushing through pain because you're really disciplined and all those different things. But where are you pushing through pain versus stepping back and reflecting? So the more we do that, the more we can really see how we're talking to ourselves and the person that we're becoming and how those mindsets and thoughts are really dictating our actions. And then even recognizing our actions. And I think this is the hardest part. Like, what's your routine when you get home from work? Do you put down your stuff? Do you kick off your shoes? Do you go grab that glass of wine? Is this why you tell yourself that you're the person that can't work out consistently or eat well? If you change that routine and just came in a different way to your house or had your gym bag in the car, could you all of a sudden become that person that goes to the gym every day after work? And so we don't think about not only how our mindsets are shaping our actions, but how our actions are reinforcing and creating the environment that then shapes our mindset. So I think it's really reflecting on those two things. And in all of that, reflection is really the most powerful thing we can do, but we so often get caught up in action, right? We get motivated to reach a goal, we go look for more tools and tactics. What we don't want to do is pause and say, who am I? Where am I? What have I done in the past? And how has that really paid off for me? And how can I separate out the tools and tactics from the mindsets that are there and even what I need moving forward?
That's a great example too of like what are the reasons? What are some of the actions we could change if your current systems that are in place are not leading you to the actions that ultimately you want? Because we're continuing to reinforce these are the reasons why I can't go to the gym at the end of the day because like I need to kick off my I need to relax. I need like whatever it is, but like maybe there are some small actions in there where you get your clothes and that moment where you're like this is what I want to do and these are in my reflection. This is the actions that I want to take to change that behavior. These are the things that I'm going to do. I'm gonna put my gym clothes in a bag, and I'm gonna put it in my, car so that I don't even need to come home, because I know if I walk through that door and I see the couch, I'm like, "Well, maybe I could just sit down for 5 minutes," and we all know that 5 minutes never stops at the 5 minutes. I have definitely done this where, like, I've even set, like, a 5-minute alarm, and I've been like, "I'm just gonna close my eyes for this 5 minutes," and then I'm like, "Oh, no." Like, 30 minutes later, I've taken a nap.
And it's not even just that we do the 5 minutes or the 30 minutes. A lot of times then there's guilt. Oh, I skipped my workout. I did this pattern again. And that becomes a snowball if we miss another workout. But we've got to recognize these habits were created for a reason. They solved a problem for us. So instead of feeling guilty about them, be like, what problem did this solve in the moment that I created this habit? Did I eat emotionally because it did make me feel better that one time? Did I come home and kick off my shoes because, I really felt exhausted that one day and now it's become a pattern? Because the more we do it, the more we do in both a positive and negative direction. So the harder we make habits we want to break and the easier we make habits we want to implement, the better off we're going to be. But that's why change is so hard, right? We're unlearning things as we're learning. When we were younger, we only had to learn. We didn't have all these bad habits, so to speak. So it was a lot easier. But there's always a way to test your potential and really see what's out there and possible for you. And sometimes it's even just saying, let me see. I'm going to test my limits and I don't know what's possible. But if I don't test them, then I'm going to stay stuck.
There was another point that I just wanted to highlight that you said in there, the flip side of the coin for something that you consider to be like a negative attribute or something that could be like essentially holding you back. I think it's so important to look at the flip side of the coin. And I know I have done this particularly with I have ADHD and I have like, in my younger years, I had really focused on why that was like a challenge for me and said things like, I just hate my brain. Why am I upstairs when I was unloading the dishwasher 3 minutes ago? Like, how did I even get here? You know what I mean? Like, because there was like 5 other tasks that led to now I'm putting away laundry and the dishwasher is still not unloaded. And that we can look at like what those kind of things are, what those attributes are, and feel frustrated with them. But a really important practice that you mentioned, and I just wanted to highlight it, is naming the flip side of the coin of why you have the strengths that you have that are the other side of that. Like there are so many incredible strengths that I get from connections that I make with my brain that happen very quickly, and they are my superpower. It also comes with some lack of attention that I have to check myself of like why I'm in another room and what the original task was for sure. But it's also my superpower. And I just want to kind of like, for a lot of people who are listening to this and you think about all of the reasons why you are kind of like unmotivated or what are your challenges to becoming the person that you want to be, make sure your language reflects the flip side of that coin of how it is your strength or what you see in your life that really, highlights the positive of that same thing that you're kind of like beating yourself down for because it does have that strength. Like, even if people are like, well, I get stuck in the moment that I'm in and it's hard for me to transition, for example, like going to the gym. You are someone who is really in the moment of like present with what you are doing. Yeah, of course we need to work on some of those transitions of like how you can get yourself to move on to the next task, but being in the moment is an incredible strength. Like, it's amazing for the people that you are around, you give them your full attention. Like, there's so many great things. So I just want everyone to kind of like think about what those are. And that kind of like leads me into my next, like kind of like thought with you is that you're very clear that perfection isn't the goal. And it actually works so against our progress. So why do you think doing it perfectly feels safer to people than doing something sustainably?
We stay in the comfort of the familiar. We are comfortable with specific pains. And a lot of us are really comfortable with the all or nothing attitude. It feels very safe to try and be perfect. And it almost alleviates some responsibility and guilt. If you have to do something perfectly and life's and now you can't, it's not your fault. It's life. But guess what? The reality of life is that it's gonna life. And so I think even going back to your previous point about owning our strengths and weaknesses, all of this is about taking ownership. And taking ownership of our life is scary. Now, I'm not saying you can control whether it rains if you want to go out for a run. I'm not saying you can control everything that is dealt you in life. You cannot. Things happen for sure. But ultimately, you always have a choice. Do you see it as an obstacle or an opportunity? So even your flaws or the things that are weaknesses for you, they are maybe what you see right now as an obstacle, but where is the opportunity in them? With perfection, okay, why are you seeking to be perfect? How often do we not step back and say, why am I doing this? Why am I, not going to the gym? Why am I telling myself this story that I can't be this person that goes to the gym? And the more we do that, and the more we even outline what our life looks like to set us up for that, the more we can start to break down little habits changes that might pay off, little mindset shifts that might pay off. But it is safer and more comfortable to go into that pain. We say it with diet and exercise all the time, right? Oh, well, I just can't see the results I want because I can't adjust my diet, but I can train all day. Well, you became comfortable with the pain of training at some point, but not with the pain of dietary change. And trust me, I said that for a very long time. I was like, give me all the workouts. I'll be in the gym all day, but make me give up one thing in diet.
But don't touch my bed. Don't touch my
Don't touch,
diet.
yeah, do not touch my ice cream. I will not give it up. No, 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 no. That is always going to be there. And so for me, that was a non negotiable. And so I had to shift my mindset about how I even addressed that non negotiable in my diet and that story I was telling myself about what I needed. But I also started to recognize, oh, I've built up a pain tolerance. I've made the choice that I can handle the discomfort here. How can I make the choice to make changes in other places? So I think it's recognizing that when we seek perfection, this is what keeps us stuck in the cycle because it's comfortable, it's familiar, even though it's painful. Like it's not comfortable trying to give all that effort, but it's just a pain we're comfortable with. And so the hardest thing that you probably need to do is give less effort, but make that effort apply in the right direction. And that's where a system does come into play. It's why we're not going on or off a plan. We are creating a system that moves us forward. We are setting that GPS with our goal and our current location. And then there's going to be rerouting along the way. There's going to be traffic jams. There's going to be pit stops. There's going to be flat tires. All these different things are going to come. But ultimately, we can always choose to reroute and keep moving forward. But it comes with recognizing the cycle where we're keeping ourselves stuck in and where we are comfortable being uncomfortable and where we're not willing to push that comfort zone. Because probably the habit you are avoiding the hardest is the one you need the most.
I love that you said, give less effort too, because like I think so much of the story that like diet culture specifically, or our health and fitness industry is selling us is like, if you just tried harder, you would get this aesthetic you're looking for. You'd get stronger. You'd be able to make that time in the gym. And it's like so many people are like, well, I'm trying as hard as I can. And to give less effort but put it in the right places is much more manageable. Like, I talk about this every January, about this not needing to be this major overhaul with every piece of your diet, every piece of your, um, results in the gym, how your workouts are structured, how your sleep. It's like everyone wants to do this major overhaul that is extremely difficult, that does not take into account all of the habits that you are, that is not setting the GPS where you currently are, and doesn't even align with your life because you picked it out of some person that like has their life and it's not even like close to yours. And I've had to, reconcile with this as well because, I had said to myself when I first had a baby, I have two children, 4 and 1, and I said like, well, I see other people going to the gym like really early. Like, why can't I just do that? And I was like, I'm exhausted. Like, and like and even if you see like other people where you would assume like maybe they're in a similar life place that they have young children, they don't sleep the same as your kids. You don't have the same life. Like you just don't. So trying to like contort yourself into somebody else's life when your circumstances haven't changed continuously sets you up for failure. Like, where's your GPS right now? What does it look like in your house? And how can we provide systems that support your life with the goals that you'd like to have? Not just like, well, if I could transport myself into somebody else's life that have like a live-in au pair, that would be great. Like, that's not how it works. So I think like that was just like honing in on that self-awareness, self-reflection, and that can be deeply uncomfortable for a lot of us.
It can be. And I think it also requires us to take a hard look at ourselves, look in that mirror, pimples and all, and see everything there. But again, we're also recognizing that all those flaws that you are seeing, if you really think about them, they have an upside to them. But also there's emotions attached to all this different language, and assessing why you feel a specific way about words is really key. Now, we're not always going to be perfect with our language. I still say words that I'm like, okay, that probably wasn't the best choice of words there, but
Yeah.
but
But
it's recognizing the power.
self-reflection there. Yeah, like,
Exactly.
if you go
But
like,
even
That's not it, but okay."
no, exactly. But even thinking about the word effort, what is effort really? Effort is a feeling. It's not actually change. And I mention that because I think a lot of times we don't recognize where we're spending effort and what we're actually spending effort on. And I say spending because I like to think about change and results as we have this habit budget. And good things that we do, TLC things we do for ourselves, are investing in ourselves. We do a lot to invest, in the lifestyle we want to lead. But we also don't recognize where there are expenses in our life. And creating new habits is an extra expense. It is hard. But there's also other outside stressors that we have going on, right? That can impact the effort of the habits we're doing. So a habit that you start in January where you're not traveling, maybe, your kids are back in school, things are easy. And not easy, but they're going pretty well. You can create an ideal routine for yourself. And so the habits might feel like they're very much coming in under your budget, right? They're not too expensive for you to do. But all of a sudden, life stressors get in the way. There's a family obligation that pops up. All of a sudden you're traveling, work, ramps up. And while that same habit is there, the effort, the feeling of effort might have gone up because of the other life stressors. They're detracting from the budget that you actually have. And you might even recognize that as you're detracting from your budget more to give effort to these other things, you're not investing in your savings and doing the massage once a month that you have been doing, or the time off that you had been taking, right? So it's recognizing where you're sort of spending that effort and if it's actually directed at change. Because you can feel like you're working really hard, but not honestly making a change because that habit isn't meeting you where you're at. And I use the example of tracking macros a lot for this because I think we've all had that time where we were tracking macros, and we do it with the new year because we've heard tracking macros is, very important, and what does get measured gets managed, right? But what's easy then, all of a sudden tracking becomes so much more effort as time goes on, even as our portions are already slipping. We're still logging stuff, but maybe the bite, lick, or nibble that we took doesn't go in there. And so all of a sudden this effort to track isn't paying off in the way we feel like it should. But what we don't recognize is that we're not continuing to make the changes with tracking. Like, we could log our current diet today, but if you log what you ate today, while that's a great way to gather data, and I highly recommend starting there so that you can see that the tracker isn't judging you, you're not actually
Mm.
making changes, but that could feel like a lot of effort just to do that habit. So it's recognizing that effort is a feeling, and it's not necessarily a feeling of actually making changes. It's just that the thing you're doing right now requires a lot of mental focus and is going to cost you other things. You have to assess, does the mental focus I need to give to this, does the time, energy that I need to give to this really match what I'm capable of giving at this time? Because if that effort doesn't match, you're going to blow your budget. There's going to be nothing left in savings. And then you're going to say F it and take the pint of Ben and Jerry's to the couch again and repeat the same cycle that you're trying to break.
Mhm. I'll try again tomorrow. Like, that's where that, like, comes into. Hey, you.
Thanks for getting in touch with the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast.
We love your questions and adore hearing from you.
Leave us a hello,
A burning question,
feedback.
or anything else you want to share with us on the podcast.
We will play your message live on air if we can.
Thanks for being an amazing friend. Stay safe and moving. You do also use a metaphor of a farmer clearing the field before planting. And that's where I kind of want to look into, what does preparation really look like for behavior change? And why do some people skip this step, and why is it important not to skip this step?
So, Midwest girl here. So, this analogy very much hit home for me, and hopefully it does for other people. But a lot of times, what we're doing is we're planting seeds in overgrown fields. And what that means is that we're trying to ingrain a habit without addressing the other habits that are there that are fighting against it. And I slightly mentioned this earlier with unlearning versus learning. When you're younger and you're learning new things, everything is just new. There is nothing there to unlearn. But as we get older, we've built up a lot of things that we need to unlearn, and a lot of stories and rituals and habits and beliefs that have gotten us to a very successful point, honestly, often. Like, a lot of even what makes us successful in our career will hold us back when we're approaching changes in other areas, because we're going to try and willpower our way through, discipline our way through, because that's what we are with the success in other areas, right? So with this like planting in an overgrown field analogy, you have to clear those weeds. If you don't clear those weeds, nothing's going to grow. So really it starts with sitting down and being like, okay, what does my current lifestyle look like? Where do I want to go? And instead of saying, hey, what's that turn to my destination at the very end? What's that first turn out of my driveway? Heck, what's even the action to turn on the car to get started? And so you want to think about, where am I right now? And then as you're reflecting on where you are right now, you're going to begin to clear out the field by thinking about, what's held me back in the past? What have I always done that's backfired? And I want you to go deeper than thinking, oh, well, I did keto last time and while it worked, it wasn't really sustainable because I like carbs. Okay. But have you done another diet before that, even, that was also about cutting something out, something that you long term wanted to include? How did you handle that? Because I mean, I know I've sort of slightly hated on keto here, but I actually don't hate on keto. And I even think low carb phases can have big benefit. I don't think we do one macro ratio for the entire time. I think CrossFit's amazing. I think all these things are tools and tactics that can be part of an overall lifestyle balance. But it's owning that our lifestyle will adjust, but also where we become so married to a tool or tactic that the second we deviated from it, we ultimately sabotage ourselves. So this is where you have to do that reflection to clear the field. And then once you have, that's where you start making those turns and you start going along your route towards your destination, and you plant the seeds, you water them, you give them love. But again, going back to the effort thing, you don't just dump more and more water, giving more and more effort to try and grow these seeds, right? That would end up killing them. It's the right amount of effort applied at the right times in the right order. And that's where that system really has to come into play. But you can only lay it out if you do that reflection first.
I love the pause for the reflection and then figure out like not only what your first turn is, but like how do I turn on this car? I think that's like such an important step that really like just in the health and fitness industry, I think we miss that a lot because we do these things where like this is what I want my end goal to be. Like I want to be like, a lot of people set aesthetic goals or, somebody else's life or like body or whatever. And they set this thing and then they're like, "Okay, let's go." It's like, "Well, we need some evaluation of who you are first, what the first step is to kind of like implementing like what? Implementing some strength into your workouts, implementing, some, fiber into your diet. Like what are the smaller things that we need to start with before we get to some of those major changes?" And I think that's such an important part and has been really helpful for me in not only like my fitness journey, but different seasons of your fitness journey. And so, like, if you're someone who's listening to this and you said, like, well, I have had successful seasons in air bunnies of my fitness journey or health journey, and like, here's where I am now. Like, we're just ever evolving humans and we're in a new season of our lives. And sometimes, like, that just starts with a quick evaluation, even if you're feeling like, well, I've been successful in health and fitness for the last, 10, 20 years but, like, an evaluation of what season am I in right now? What are my goals? And what are my first steps to get there? And, like, that just self-evaluation, I think, for women needs to be happening frequently. Even if you've got it figured out, even if you've got it dialed in, like, I think that needs to be happening frequently because, like, we're always changing. And this is kind of where I want to get into, how with age, how our health and fitness journey changes because that is a factor too. Like as we get older, as we, get enter in different seasons. But you mentioned self-sabotage there. And a lot of people say, a lot of my listeners say they are self-sabotaging and they don't know how to stop. So how do you help someone recognize old habits that have undermined their new one and trying to build the new habits that they want to sustain?
Self-sabotage is an interesting one because I almost would argue you won't find one person who doesn't. I know I've been guilty of it. I've called it the one more game where I'll get one piece of candy on a stressful day and all of a sudden, I'll be walking back to the couch and then I'll sit down and I'll have eaten it before I even sat down. And then I'll walk back to the cabinet and be like, one more, one more, one more.
Because I
And
wanted
one
to
more
eat
is
this while I was sitting.
exactly. And then eventually you're like, okay, I'm just grabbing the entire bag.
I'll
But
bring
it's
this.
but it's recognizing that that was a pattern that solves something in the moment. As weird as that sounds, so often the things we default into were a fix at some point. That made me feel better at one point. doing that. Like, I even have great memories of studying and eating whole bags of Reese's Pieces because that's like, I love the chocolate peanut butter. Sorry, love it. But I have like fond memories of doing that, even if it didn't pay off in the goals that I wanted and ultimately made me feel not so good at points. But it was a solution to a problem. It's associated with good feelings or that quick fix. And we are creatures of comfort, convenience, and we do want immediate results. Like, we aren't patient. Patience is something we have to learn and build. And so I think it's recognizing that when you self sabotage, you're going to a place of comfort and familiarity. And this isn't something to beat yourself up over. And the more you create that guilt, the more you create the spiral. And so I use the analogy of getting a flat tire. If you get a flat tire, you pull over to the side of the road. If you know how to fix the flat, you fix it. If you don't, you call AAA. What you don't do is take out a knife and slash the other 3 tires and then let your car on fire and walk off just abandoning it. Yet that's what we really do with our diet and workouts, right? We, make one mistake or we do one deviation or we self-sabotage a little bit and we just create guilt. It's the guilt that gets us. And the more we can recognize, hey, I do this for a reason. Instead of beating myself up, how can I get curious and say, why has this pattern existed for me? What problem has it solved? And then what could I replace it with? How could I make it harder to keep repeating? And first, it just starts with even noticing sometimes. And then you got to give yourself a pat on the back for noticing. But with the one more game for me, it was something as simple as literally putting the candy in the freezer. Frozen candy tastes delicious. Okay. I don't know why that solved it for me, but at the same time I do, it shifted the environment. It was simply making it that much harder. I was like, okay, the candy's now here for whenever I want it. I can use it in an ice cream pie. And so for me, that little shift broke the pattern just enough that I didn't get to go back to the cabinet. I didn't repeat it. It made me notice it a little bit more to then create replacement behaviors. Okay, does this always happen on specific days? Does this always happen at specific times? How can I start to notice? Is it even happening because I'm starting to feel too deprived because I'm telling myself I can't have something somewhere else? Because I think we don't recognize that too. The second we say we can't have something, we want it even more. If you're choosing, though, not to have it, that's a different thing. Hey, I'm choosing not to have this candy right now in this phase, or I'm choosing not to have my Friday night glass of wine in this phase, but at a different season of life, I can make a different choice. It completely shifts it. It's the I get to versus I have to mentality to some extent.
I love that you said that. I've brought that up so many times with the workouts. Like, I have to go to the gym is a choice for your language, and it sets this up for like this thing that you like have to do, and it just like has this negative connotation to it where like I get to work out today is such a privilege to be able to move your body in a healthy way that like it changes the entire structure of the activity that you're doing. And that language is so important. One of the other things that you've mentioned that has been a major focus for me is the deep interest in the curiosity mindset. Asking why instead of judging, I think is such an important thing, not only for ourselves, but in our relationships with others and how we interact with the world. This environment that we're in right now is can be really volatile in many ways. Your relationships with yourself, your relationships with others, your relationships with your community. It's a crazy time. And I think if we all approach things with a little bit more curiosity, it would have some really impactful changes and with ourselves too. So, how does curiosity change the way people approach assessments, setbacks, habits that haven't worked in the past?
Feedback isn't failure.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience. And so I think when we're curious, we approach it as how can I learn from everything that's going on? We so often want to apply judgment. And I think it comes back to how we're managing our expectations. So when I go into something new, and I've done lots of programs that I did not like, I would not recommend in like not just diet and exercise, but in so many different areas of my life. Yet I don't feel negatively about any of those because I learned something, even if it was something I didn't want to do that wasn't supposed to come out of the program. So I've seen everything as that chance for feedback to learn from it. It's not always easy. Like we do get down. Like I'm not going to tell you that I'm perfect with any of this. I use language I shouldn't, but it's that pause to reflect and then see how that is compounding or why that's even happening. And I'm going down that spiral that really helps. But it is coming back to being curious. And one of the things I started doing that I think really helped me reframe it because it was almost going to the other side of the spectrum with it is that I started looking for reasons to debate on the side I didn't believe in. So when was trying to get myself to track macros or make workout changes that were hard because I had been the do more, longer workouts, more cardio, eat less, don't track macros, just eat clean. This was my mantra, like a lot of restriction, a lot of effort thrown at things, and it was not paying off. I was like, I've been told the opposite. I've been told to track macros. I've been told to increase my protein. I've been told to cut back on cardio. How can I find ways or reasons that this is right? Because I was pushing back so hard on those habits, yet I wasn't liking where I was at. And again, we go to the pain that is comfortable, right? So that challenge of myself of how can I actually debate on the team that I don't believe in allowed me to see a lot more opportunity in the options. I still don't agree with all of it, but I now am more open to it. And that's even helped me at one season where it wasn't right. It become right. Like I am very much a believer in tracking macros, but I don't believe one type of tracking is right for everybody. I think what gets measured gets managed, but I found that principle only out of arguing against tracking to myself once I believed in tracking. And at first I had to argue even for tracking, right? But it's looking at the other side and being like, how could this be right? Or how could this serve me or somebody else to better understand the nuance in things?
That's such a great point because on so many levels, but, like, we wanna see the other side of the coin, like, there's no downside in trying to see, like, where whatever mindset we're stuck in, like, looking at the flaws in that. Like, there's no downside to that, there's only value to be gained, and it's such an important, like, way that not only you can look at and I'll preach this till the end of the earth, is like these mindset things, yeah, like, of course they can apply to your diet, of course they can apply to, your workouts in the gym, but they're going to apply to every aspect of your life because all of these things are just practice for life. They're just the habits that we're doing in life. So if we look at things, this part of our life with curiosity and this one with curiosity, we're just building habits that are going to translate into other aspects of our life and our relationships and how we approach the world because like all of these actions that we're doing are just building us. Which is like such a cool way to think about it because sometimes like we just isolate, our diet's over here, our workouts are over here, our mindset's over here, when it's like all of those are working together as well as our relationships and our sleep and like all of these things that make us us. So that curiosity mindset is not only going to pay off when it comes to looking at like one of the benefits in some of these um systems that I have, but like how can I translate this into my life?
The gym and our nutrition changes really are like that training ground for building strength. And I don't just mean physical strength, I mean the strength to overcome because ultimately what dictates success is just our ability to pick ourselves back up, believe we're going to conquer the thing and the challenge in front of us and keep going. And I know we don't often see success as failure, but that's really what it is. It's consecutive failures we just didn't give up on. But if you look at any story that you love of someone who's super successful that even seemed like an overnight success, trust me, they had a lot of struggles. They just don't seem that way because they kept picking themselves back up to move forward.
And they use that information. They like I always say this with like, failed relationships too. I'm like, those aren't failed, those were all like learning and training ground for like what you like, what you didn't like, what you look for in a partner, what you want to be for it, like as a partner. Like all of these are information that we take into the next stages of our life. And so some of the things that I wanted to you talk about the prioritizing what we truly value. And I think that's so important because our value systems are different for every person. And this is part of kind of like that planning, like setting the stage before we start something new. But how do you get to the heart of the core values? Like if I'm someone who is like, okay, I'm going to set what my values are when it comes to like health and nutrition, how do we get to the heart of those core values? And how does that influence our decisions?
Values are such an interesting thing, and I think it's very challenging, just like what's even possible for me. These questions are something that I don't think we'll ever give an answer to, and that will just be the answer. I think your values are going to shift over your life, especially if you're trying to constantly learn and grow. But I think you almost have to start very surface level when you're thinking about these things as non-negotiables. And this sounds like a really silly example, but for me, I had to say I value dessert And every time I would make dietary changes to try and see body recomp, I would cut out dessert first, and that ultimately sabotaged me. And
Yeah, I
that's a
love that.
but I was gonna
Like,
say
I
it's a ve
value dessert.
I do,
Say
but it was
it out loud, you know?
and it was a very silly thing, but on a deeper level, it was I value a certain experience out of life. I wanna enjoy life in certain ways. And the more I started to dive into that, I also saw, specific holidays that were important for me, holidays that aren't important for me that I maybe could negotiate on. And even owning that dessert was so important, like, now it's not near as important because I own the power of choice with it. But I think in that, I started to really recognize where my values were, and that allowed me to then evolve everything. But I think it starts with even recognizing, what are your actions saying you value? Like, my actions were saying, I value dessert. That's why I always keep repeating the same cycle of falling off because I keep restricting it. So your actions are coming out of your belief system, your mindsets, your values. So what are you enacting every day? And if your actions aren't in line with what you want to value, how are you going to shift that to step into that person? And that's where you even then have to come back to the language you're using. How are you speaking to yourself that might not be in line with what you value? Because if you're telling yourself, I value working out, but you're not working out every day, what story are you telling yourself to be a disconnect between what you say you value and what you're actually doing? And that's where we can start to see the little things holding us back, the unlearning that has to go on, and we can bring ourselves back to what we value. Or even saying, maybe I don't value working out 6 days a week. Maybe I really do only value working out 3 days. Or maybe the value in working out for me isn't that I like lifting more in the gym. I just want to be able to get up and down off the ground with my grandkids. So, okay, tying it back to that, you haven't seen the connection between what you're doing in the gym and what you value. So how can you then create that connection, right? So it's this constant sort of like untangling, pulling different threads to see where they lead to really find out who and what you are. But I think a big part of that assessment is, what actions are we taking that hint at what we actually value, and are they in line? And if they aren't in line, why do we value, and why aren't we then doing the actions there to be in line with the values?
So, you already know we make the best workout gear, but one of our best products, our highest rated product on our website, is actually our collagen. If you have not heard about Glow Up by CVG, you are missing out. There is almost 700 five-star reviews on this product because it is such an amazing supplement. Actually, looking at it today, there are only 2 one-stars that were meant to be 5 stars. They love the product, they hit the wrong amount of stars. This is one of our most popular products for a reason. It dissolves like no other collagen. It's type 1 and 3. You're gonna have healthier skin, better joint mobility. Everything about this collagen makes it easy to put into your daily routine. So if you haven't tried Glow Up, get on cvg.com and make sure to add it to cart today. It's our best product.
That's such a wonderful point of, like, what is it that we value? How can we untangle that, and how does it align with our actions? And this is, like, one of those that I keep going back to, like, we need to reevaluate where that value system is, and just because one thing has fallen off of the top of our values doesn't mean it completely falls off the page. Like, sometime in some seasons, like, time in the gym moves. It moves from, maybe it was at your number 1 spot, maybe it was at your number 2 spot, now it's more at, like, 3 or 4. Like, it doesn't mean it's fallen off the page, it just means we're in a different season and how we're gonna structure that value system. I just wanna give you guys an example for this one. It's like, when I restructured my value system, time with my very young family is very important to me. I also work full time, I also go to the gym. I also so, like, all of those things are also, I do value those, but the structure changed. The time that I spend with them during their wake windows when they're not at gymnastics, that's very important to me. But also, my health is very important to me, and being able to pick them up and get them in the crib comfortably, all of those things are very important to me. That shifted with the time that I spend in the gym, but it didn't fall off the page. So, like, the structure changed a little bit where, like, I'm spending less time there, but it hasn't fallen off. It's still worked. It's still working into the system because it also is something I value, but you can't have 5 things in the number 1 spot. You only have a certain amount of time. Everyone can't sit in the number one spot and be like, well, I can just be perfect at everything. And this kind of like intertwines with it, the entire messaging, but we have to be realistic with who's sitting in the driver's seat, who's sitting in the passenger seat, and realize that everybody's still in the car, but we're going to structure it in a way of like, this is what my value system is. So I just love like how you laid that out for us. And then I kind of wanted to shift into what the change loop looks like with that. Um, because you talk about like people are stuck in the change loop, and that's motivation spikes, action fades, guilt creeps in. And so many of my listeners are like, yes, I totally understand that. How do we break it though? How do we break out of it?
It's recognizing when the effort no longer feels worth the outcome. And it's recognizing when we get sort of habit complacency. We put our habits on autopilot. There is always going to be a drift because we can't always be motivated in the same way. Goals are going to shift, values are going to shift. And bringing it back to what you said, like it's even then going back to why do you value your health? So when you feel yourself feeling really down, feeling like nothing's happening, assess, okay, where have habits potentially slid and is nothing really building, or am I only measuring progress in one way? But then also, where am I not necessarily doing things that are truly in line with my values? If you value your health, you value showing up for everybody else too. That's probably part of why you want to be healthy. But in that, how often do we say I want to be there for everybody else, and then we put everybody else's needs first and we don't show up for ourselves? And so it's thinking about, okay, is that really the right way to approach it, and where am I sort of leaving some of that on the table, right? So with valuing showing up for everybody else, how can you show up better for everybody else? By also taking care of yourself. How do you inspire everybody else to show up better for themselves? By taking care of yourself. Okay, so then how can I find a way to still prioritize these things? And that's where it sort of comes to doubling down with the change loop instead of giving up. So we have to recognize we get really excited about a new program, a new plan, especially around, like January, let's just say, where timing is usually perfect. It's after the holidays, everything's quieted down. Generally, it's a good season to do a little bit more. And so we go all in, really excited, potentially having put on a little fluff from the holidays, even, feeling a little out of our routine. We want to get back to it. We might even have some races we've set up for, the spring and summer. So we're motivated and we're willing to do a lot more effort. And lifestyle might even be conducive to that. So we go all in. The problem is we don't start to assess when our lifestyle might have shifted or when our motivation starts to drop, because it's going to drop. We don't like repeating the same thing forever. We do get shiny object syndrome, and it's not a bad thing, but it's recognizing how to rein that in to stay focused on the basics. Because I think too, we start to think, this is too basic. I should be more advanced. I need more advanced tactics. But the opposite of
The
basic
old
is
I
that,
should be.
well, yes, shouldn't all over something. But basic and advanced aren't opposing forces. The opposite of basics are extremes. And that's what we tend to go to, these extremes that cost more effort. And so what happens is, we go all in with the program, we get excited by the promise of it, we see some results, but then habits start to, the effort starts to feel like too much with them, a lifestyle creeps in, stress rises, and all of a sudden we're not seeing the results we feel we deserve from it. And there might be some slippage of the habits as well, as we're not seeing the progress, or maybe progress is building and we're just in one of those dead zones, because there are phases where we don't see progress in exactly the way we want. And so what ends up happening is we have one little blip, one slip up, we create the guilt, we quit, and we're starting over. At that time where stuff starts to not feel worth it, we start to doubt our progress. That's where we need to double down. And this is where I would ask you to even step back and be like, how are you measuring success, and what are your expectations right now? And if you quit, is this the same hard point you've always hit that you've conditioned yourself to turn back out? Because I think too, we don't recognize that. A lot of us have conditioned ourselves to repeat the same 4, 6, 8 week cycle, whatever it is for you, where at that 4 weeks, if something hasn't magically happened, which generally it hasn't, because there's a rate at which progress happens, right? We
That's a
turn
short
back.
period of time in the grand scheme of things. That's a blip.
Exactly, but we're so conditioned ourselves to have the same mindsets, the same pattern repeat at that time frame. So if you hit that time frame and you're noticing that you're about to repeat that, the same feelings of this isn't worth it, I'm not seeing the results I want, or I'm bored with it, I need to do something new, really assess what's going on. And that's where you can find the basics that you need to go back to that might have slipped, the things that aren't working that you do need to change. And that's where you can get a little excited with something new, or even the ways that you can evolve habits to keep that fun alive, or even modify them to fit the other stresses that are going on. And that's the only way to break out of that change loop, is to really recognize that we hit the same hard. And at some point, we have to choose to push into it. And that doesn't just mean trusting the process more and doing the same thing that might not be working, but it means just not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. It means really reflecting on, where is my consistency? What has shifted in my life? What do I need to evolve? And what can I keep doing instead of adding more and not falling prey to the same mindsets and habits and cycle I've always fallen into?
And something that you hit on there when it comes to that loop is guilt. And I think that's that immediately follows, like, once we recognize, is this the time that I've fallen off every, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is this the time? And then it's followed by this, like, once you have that recognition, you have most of the time guilt that follows, where you recognize you are sabotaging essentially, at the same place. So I want to talk about that guilt a little bit around training, around nutrition, around changing plans, because I think that is, such a main driver when it comes to burnout. So why is guilt such a powerful driver with burnout, especially for high achieving women? So I know a lot of listeners here are like, yes, I feel that intense guilt. And yeah, it's associated with burnout. So why is that the main driver?
When you feel guilty, what do? You think, I'm weak, I'm not strong enough, I need to apply more effort. If I let myself off the hook and do less, I'm giving up. You're not giving up, you're giving yourself grace. Guilt is the feedback
I always
that
go,
the
well, Kelsey, just do better. I'm like, there's absolutely no action to it, but it's just like, do better, like try harder. It's like,
oh, I'm the same
um,
way. I throw more effort at it. I'm like, okay, well, I'm feeling guilty because I'm going to quit. So I'm going to double down and give more effort. And that's exactly the pain we're comfortable with. But that creates the burnout, because ultimately, when we feel guilty and we double down and do more, we're just accelerating the time at which we're going to burn out, because that effort is not going to equal faster outcome. It's not going to match our lifestyle. When you feel guilt that you want to break the routines and habits that you have there, instead of letting that guilt snowball, instead of applying more effort, be like, this is my opportunity to back off and show myself my strength in being able to systematize what I need. Showing myself my strength that backing off doesn't mean I'm not going to see results faster. And so it's giving yourself almost a pat on the back for recognizing that you're about to feel guilty because you're about to try and apply more effort, and instead of it, you're going to be strong enough to push into the discomfort that you are not comfortable with. And so in doing less, you're ultimately going to find that you get remotivated, because the more you do, the more you do. And when we start to feel perfect with setting less as the expectation and goal, we feel successful in that. I can tell you, and actually a funny thing that happens with this, but when I've told myself I have to work out 6 days a week, if I miss a day and I get 5 days in, I feel like a failure. I'm like, I missed a day. It's horrible. But if I sit down and say, okay, what's realistic right now? And it's only 5 days. And then I do 5 days. All of a sudden I'm like, woo, I did 5 days, right? Same 5 days. Yes, maybe one workout was designed for the 5 days versus the other one was designed for six, but ultimately it's the same time in the gym, and one makes me feel successful. So as you start to feel like, hey, this might not be worth it, assess where your consistency is, assess other life factors. Where are other stressors in your life now making the diet and exercise changes that you want to make harder? And then say, hey, can I change those other stressors? Okay, no, I can't change, career stress. I can't change family obligations, but then I can change these habits to really fit. And that ultimately will keep you moving forward, where you would have doubled down and created burnout because you felt guilty. So recognize that guilt is that warning sign and that opportunity for you to step into the strength that you can really have to steer into the discomfort of something new by planning less and ultimately creating more success and that ability to be more perfect and build that motivation.
Love that you reframed that as the strength. Because, like, so many of us, when we hit that guilt, it's like, because we're not good enough. Like, that's immediately where we go. But, like, the strength of trying something new in the discomfort, that we haven't tried before. So like you guys, like if you're those who are listening, like you have to know what it is like your patterns are. Like, do you start to throw more effort into it? Like, what is it that you are comfortable in, and how can we change that? And that's really where the strength is built because like in the past at different seasons in my life, if you had said that, I would have been like, well, that's just like weakness, giving up. Like, cause that's my language. I mean, we all have our different like stories, but my language is like, oh, like recognizing that like 5 days is good. What about like, well, I'm a failure? But that's actually building my new patterns to sustainability, and that's such a, like, cool reframe. I have to hit on one more thing, I know, but I have to hit on this. So you've said that you don't feel old because of your age. You feel old because you stop doing things that keep you young. I love this so much. Like, I can't like, you said it so perfectly. So, like, how do the beliefs about aging quietly shape how people move, train, show up in their bodies over time? Um, can you just explain this? This is one of those things that, like, I continue to talk to people about who are in my life who just kind of, like, go into this, "Well, I can't play basketball anymore because like, Kelsey, you don't understand, I have old knees." And I'm like, "We're the same age." Like, I don't like, you know what I mean? Like, it just becomes this, like, reinforcing thing. So, can you just talk about that a little bit and how this shapes our beliefs?
You can't control the number. Things are going to build up with wear and tear and use over time. You are going to have health concerns pop up. But I will tell you, you don't become old at a specific age. I can tell you, I have people tell me at 25 they're old, and people tell me at 93 they're not old, and even older. And it is a mindset, and it's not denying that changes don't happen. Again, we have injuries and aches and pains, and potentially the harder you use your body younger, the more those are going to add up. But what you're not recognizing is that a lot of that is previous lifestyle factors, little superhero complex, maybe pushing through the pain. But those are all things that are now within your power to control the habit changes that you make to move forward. Sure, you can't reverse some of the things that have happened. Sure, you might have health concerns that you aren't going to ever be rid of or cured of. But at the same time, you can always own the impact those have and then control what you can control. Because so often we write off these labels, these things as just the end all be all, when there's so much we can actually do to improve them, like thyroid health, addressing different changes with us not being able to utilize protein as efficiently or build muscle as easily as we get older. All these things are addressable. No, it's not gonna be the same, but that doesn't mean you can't move forward and feel your most fabulous. All we have to do is consider, okay, what does this actually mean? How have these hormonal shifts impacted me? Okay, I don't utilize protein as efficiently. Well, I can add more protein. Okay, well, I don't create the same stimulus for muscle growth that I used to. Okay, well, how can I change how I'm training in the gym to create that same stimulus? Okay, I don't recover as fast. Okay, well, how's your mobility routine? Maybe even how was your mobility routine and how are you skipping your warm ups for the last decade that have now added up in some aches and pains that are going to take some time to reverse? But it goes back to controlling what you can control. Because, I mean, if you really think about it, what's the alternative? You say, this is just it, I'm doomed. Well, that's no way to live. But yes, owning that your body has changed, owning that age does come with different things because you've been on this planet longer and you've actually learned a lot too in that time.
You could
But
have
you've
you could use that as everything that you've learned.
Exactly. And but previous dieting and training practices have added up. But as you even mentioned earlier, our body is resilient. It's our mind that we have to convince that our body can be resilient, but it takes us doing differently. And even going back to strength and the guilt and the self-sabotage, there is a lot of strength in doing different and pivoting. But instead, we so often just think our strength is in doing more of the same, but that's what keeps us stuck. And so it's recognizing this isn't just like, because we say, it's stupid to expect a different outcome repeating the same things, but we're repeating the same mindsets. And we have to recognize it's not just actions, but it is those mindsets that we are repeating. So if you believe you're old, you're going to be old. It's not denying that things might
100%.
not creep in, but if you believe you're old, you're going to be old. If you choose to control what you can control and meet yourself where you are, you will be amazed at how resilient your body is and how resilient your mind is and how much capacity for growth you really have when you implement a system. And it's going to look different than when you were younger because nothing works forever.
I love how you brought that back to, like, it's not the same system as when you were younger. You know, I had someone very close to me, he was getting so frustrated with he kept, putting on weight over the years that he was uncomfortable with, and then he was saying like, "Well, I keep trying to run. I'm a runner, and I keep trying to run, but my knees, they're I'm having so much pain. I can't even run up the street now, and like, so I just can't do it." And he just like threw his hands up to like, "Well, I'm just never gonna do that again." And I was like, "So here's the thing: what you have done up until now is not what you can do moving forward, and we need to like recognize that. We need to look at it for what it is." What you've done in the past with like years of soccer or like years of running. And then you look at the body that you are at right now, where you have essentially neglected your health for a very long time. And you're carrying extra weight on those knees, on those joints who that are older. So yeah, they hurt. You're not 25. Like, yeah, they hurt, and we need to approach it in a different way and not just like, "I'm never gonna run again. I've reached this point where, like, this is just who I am," but, like, we need to look at, like, what is the systems that you think are like, "This is the only way that I can do this to get back in shape because that's what I've done in the past," but you have a new body now. You have a different body now, and for, some of the things that we had talked about is, like, we need to look at like some strength training around some of these injuries. We need to look at like how we can build up to being able to run again because the fact is that repetitive movements, and I know a lot of people when they start their health and fitness journey, they go to something like running. The impact on your body with just going out and running is difficult. It's a lot on it, and if we don't have muscles supporting those joints, we're going to see more injury. It's very repetitive. It's hard on our body, especially as we age. So we need to look at what are some of the things that you love to do. Again, like where do we riddle that back to starting the car? What do you love to do? What are some of the goals? But we need to look at like take 10 steps back behind that and like how do we get there? If you love to play basketball, this is my partner right now. He's like, well, I'm just not gonna be able to play any. I'm like, "You're 36 years old. Like, are you never gonna play basketball again for the rest of your life because you've decided that you're too, like, old for basketball? Or are you going to take some steps that support your body as it is now?" No, you can't just show up to the court and, like, no warm up, no right shoes, you're in your flip-flops and start, like, shooting around, like, no, you're not 17. Like those are 2 different times, but can you still do the things that you love? And I just for a lot of people, I want you to think about it, like, what are some of the things that you've written off because now you're too old to do that, like, is that gonna be your story? Does it end now? Are you never gonna do the things that you love? Like, this is we just need to look at different modalities to get there.
Movement is medicine. Use it or lose it. The
Such
thing
medicine.
is so
Yeah.
often, like things that have happened aren't always our fault, but it's always
Mm.
our responsibility how we choose to move forward. And even when you're like, you're not 17 anymore, you can't do this. Well, I would even argue you probably shouldn't have done it at that age. So let's even spread the message now that you'll age better and you can redefine how you age by doing proper practices as early as possible. But it's never too late to make that change and move forward from where you are now. And it's recognizing that you can always keep that identity. Sometimes you just have to shift how you're approaching that identity. If you see yourself as a runner, okay, well, what does a runner need to support their running? What do you need to get back to that? And the sooner you start doing those things, the better off you're going to be. But it always comes back to controlling what you can control. And it's not an easy thing. And as I said, like health concerns pop up, injuries and aches and pains pop up. But the more we see the gym and that training, or even how we're fueling our body as opportunity to impact the outcomes, the better off we're gonna be. And even that microcosm, especially the gym, like you don't recognize how much you deadlift in everyday life, how much you squat in everyday life. And if you want to do those things, instead of demonizing those movements in the gym, say, why are they causing me pain? What isn't working? What previous injuries are adding up so you can include the mobility work? And then how can I modify this move to match what I need now to build back this movement pattern? Because the more we see the training in the gym as that opportunity to learn the proper movements, the less at risk for injury in everyday life we really are. Like step ups, going up the stairs. So if your knees hurt with going up the stairs, we have to break down why are they hurting with going up the stairs? How can we improve it? And no, you can't make every injury completely go away, but you can manage a lot more than you think by really breaking down what's going on and how those previous lifestyle factors have even added up till now.
That's Thank you so much, Corey. This has been like such a great not only discussion with you, but so many people are going to be able to take, we're training for life here. Like your time spent in the gym is going to help every other aspect of your life. So let's like use that as the opportunity that it is. We do have a giveaway for everyone who is listening to the podcast. And the giveaway is going to include Corey's book. So you could get, and this has so much information in it. I did want to just touch on that. I mean, we've talked a lot in this podcast, but it's really just touching on everything that is included in her book. And honestly, just like some different breakdowns. Like she has movements in here. She has, diet in here. You have so much in here that really just is like such amazing like guide for anyone that's listening and wants to make some changes. So if you love what Corey has had to say, which I know guys do, you're going to want to enter in this giveaway. We're going to put the specifics in at each one of the posts on how to enter, but you're going to get a book and of course a CVG gift card because you need to be outfitted for your amazing journey. um, so you guys can enter in on several platforms, but you do need to read the description of how to enter for depending on the platform that you're on. If it's Instagram, it's Facebook, if it's YouTube, because we're gonna pick a bunch of winners. This is what we like to do. So definitely check that out because we're going to have an awesome giveaway for you. And Corey, our listeners want to know where they can hear more from you. So can you tell them where they can find you?
I am redefining strength on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all over. And if you are interested in getting a copy of the book, it's redefiningstrength.com/book. But it was a pleasure talking with you. And I just hope that everybody really decides to sit with themselves and say, what do I want out of this life? And how am I going to go get it?
Which is like, yes. Like, what else are we doing here on this planet? That snippet, like right there is like everything that we're here to do. So guys, like, thank you, Corey, so much for being on. And thank you so much for just like being such a breath of fresh air in the health and fitness industry and sharing your wealth of knowledge and empowerment with so many people, because this is truly life changing information if we can utilize it and put those systems into our lives. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. Like attracts like. You guys are empowering women all over, and it's amazing.
Thank you so much.